How's it going, everybody? It's Blister again, and thanks for tuning in to another classic WoW video. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're going to be talking about stuff that actually didn't even make it to classic WoW. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about stuff that was actually cut from the first iteration of the game. There was actually quite a bit of stuff that was cut from the game. We probably still don't know what all of that is, but we do have a good amount of information on what some of the stuff was. Today we're going to go over some of those things. To start off with, we're going to talk about something that some of you might not say is actually content, but Classic WoW was actually supposed to go all the way from 1 to 70. That's right, 60 initially was not the cap for this game. It was actually all the way up to 70. There were also a lot of zones and more raids that didn't make it into the game either. Now, a lot of the content that was cut was stuff that was revolved around the Warcraft 3 story. Initially, Blizzard had planned to wrap up most of, if not all of the storylines from Warcraft 3 in the first iteration of World of Warcraft. There was Hellfire Peninsula, which had a full map that was actually completed, and it looked a lot more like Warcraft 3. There was Northrend, although we don't know what it would have looked like. We don't see anything in-game about it, but it was initially planned. There was Black Temple. That was actually a raid that they planned on doing for Classic WoW, which makes sense when you think about it because it came out in 2.1 patch cycle, which was fairly early in the entirety of Burning Crusade's lifespan, and it was the whole attraction to that expansion was fighting Illidan. Karazhan was also another raid that was supposed to make it into Classic WoW. The interesting thing about Karazhan is that it has some interesting stuff with it because ATS actually teleported the user to Deadwind Pass where Karazhan is located in-game. It might have played out a little bit differently if they had been able to include that staff, because if you're familiar with it, you actually had to get the pieces for the staff from Naxxramas and from AQ40. Karazhan was also similar to Hellfire Peninsula, where there actually was a place in-game for it already. There was a tower of Karazhan created. There was no inside of it created, but the tower was there. It did look different than what we see today, but it was completely there. Mount Hyjal was actually a complete zone that was also cut out, kind of like Hellfire Peninsula, and you could actually get to that zone in Classic WoW. The reason why they wanted to include this zone is because it was the final battle site for Reign of Chaos. So those are the big hitters for Warcraft 3's story. There are some other things that I do want to talk about, though, that didn't make it into Classic WoW that I find to be interesting. The first is another raiding zone. That's kind of what they classified it as. I wasn't sure if it was a raid spot and a zone, but anyways, the zone is Dragon Isles, and it was actually for levels, or supposed to be for levels 65 to 70. If you look at the 2003 instance roadmap, you can actually see it on there. And in the beta, there was actually game files called Dragon Isles. If you go and you look at those game files, you can see that it depicts a lot of art of monstrous sea creatures, kind of similar to the same theme of N'Zoth. Because of this, a lot of people actually thought that this was going to be an old god zone rather than a dragonflight area, which the name would lead to. Even though the Dragon Isles weren't straight from Warcraft 3, it actually was a map in Warcraft 2. Something else that I found interesting when I was looking at this is Kazan was a zone that was supposed to be in Classic WoW. Kazan is the Goblin home area. It was actually later introduced into Cataclysm. But in the World of Warcraft behind the scenes, the Undermine was part of the map, which actually had transportation to Booty Bay, Kultiras, and Ratchet. It was actually designed with 4 coastal zones: Resort Beach, Salvage Beach, Black Beach, and Rainforest. When I think about all this and how much they actually were working on Kazan, it kind of started to get me to think if goblins actually were ever planned to be released in Classic, and if so, what faction would they have gone for back then? Something else, and this is another zone that is always brought up when it comes to a new expansion, but it kind of started to lose some strength because of something that was introduced in Legion, and that zone is Emerald Dream. there are multiple portals where multiple bosses can spawn in the actual world in Classic, and behind them there is supposed to be a portal that actually leads to the Emerald Dream. Now, nobody actually has ever been able to go into those portals because they've never worked, so we've never actually seen much of what's on the other side. We do have some screenshots of what some initial art styles and what the world would have looked like, but nobody's actually been able to get in there for as far as I know. Something else that's actually an interesting tidbit that I didn't learn until a couple days ago was the Caverns of Time was something that was on the 2003 dungeon roadmap. But what's even more interesting is Black Morass was actually in the game files in Classic WoW, and you could actually go into the instance, and to be honest, it doesn't look very different than what we actually have in game now. Another instance that was cut from Classic WoW that we know about is the Stormwind Vault. Now, we've never really heard too much about this. Blizzard hasn't really talked about it, and from all accounts, it seems like it was probably a good idea for them to cut it because it was directly in Stormwind and it would have been a pain in the ass for Horde to try and get there. But all we can guess is that it was pretty much just a bigger version of the Stormwind stockades. And more zones, even more zones. There was more zones than that were cut. There was actually 2 islands off the coast of Stranglethorn Vale that were completely cut from the game. There was the island of Dr. Lapidus and Gillimagin's Isle. Both of those were off the coast of Stranglethorn Vale, and the maps had been completely done. They just needed to be populated with mobs. That was it. But, just like everything else on this list, because of time constraints and how much longer everything else in the game took, ultimately these 2 islands were cut. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, and possibly one of the more interesting items, is a battleground that actually got cut from Classic WoW. That battleground was called Azshara Crater. Now, this battleground was actually located in Azshara, and it was supposed to be a similar playstyle to AV. The entrances were actually already placed in Azshara, but they were never used. A lot of the reasons for why this battleground never got created is from Alterac Valley actually taking too long to balance and develop. So, just like everything else, because of time constraints, this battleground was actually cut from the game. Later on in WoW's lifespan, when we get to Mists of Pandaria, Blizzard actually considered bringing back this battleground and putting it into the game again. But, again, it was cut in favor of the other 2 battlegrounds that they were considering at the time. Well, that's it, guys. Those were the most interesting cuts that I could find from Classic WoW. I'm sure there's a lot more that I didn't go over in this list, and I'm sure there's even more that I haven't even heard about yet. But this, to me, was the most interesting stuff. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything else that I missed on this list that you guys actually find interesting as well. I'd be thrilled to hear about it because I always love learning about these little tidbits about Classic WoW's history. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, it's Radit here. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. We put out multiple new videos each week, and we appreciate all of your support. Thanks for watching, everyone, and cheers.